So our subject matter for today is the three Gunnas, also known as the three modes of material nature, or to put it simply, three energies that pervade this entire creation. And basically everything we see and all the subtle material energy that we don't see is a combination of these three energies. And these three energies are always in competition with one another, and these three energies pervade every aspect of our life. So we want to become very well acquainted with these three energies today, so we can see how they are working in our own lives. And this philosophy of the three Gunas is a commonality amongst all the Saddarshans, the six classical schools of Indian philosophy. And by gaining a clear understanding of these three energies, it'll give you very helpful insight into all aspects of life. So they're called the three Gunas, and the word Guna, it means rope or being bound. So these are three energies that bind the living entity. It can also mean string or strand, thread. So the names of these three energies are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So Sattva Gun is the energy of clarity, equilibrium, steadiness of mind, peacefulness. Very nice energy, and we want to be situated in that energy as much as possible and try to cultivate this energy of Sattva Gun more and more in our life. The next energy is the energy of a Rajas, and the qualities of this energy are activity, passion, lust, movement, creativity, dynamism. It's a very dynamic energy. And the next one down is Tamas, or Tamagun. And this energy is very slow, very dense. It's got the quality of dullness, inertia, sleep. So it's a very slow energy. And these three energies are the basis of all of our experience. And they're reflected in all physical, mental and emotional states. And these three energies, they're also intermixed. So although we can describe them as three different energies or three different categories, each energy, each guna, does contain a proportion of the previous ones. So they're never completely, exclusively just sattva or just rajas or just tamas, because they're like three strands on a rope intermixed together. But sometimes in our experience or in the outer world, the sattva gun is more prominent, sometimes the rajas is more prominent, and sometimes the tamagun is more prominent. So one day there was 3 students, and it was 5 p.m. and they just finished a class and they needed to be on the other side of town at 6 p.m. So then the teacher told them, you need to be here at this address 6 p.m. And so the first person, okay, 6 p.m, rushes out of class, jumps in a rickshaw and a taxi and just takes off. And then realizes, oh, they didn't even write down the address, they don't even know where they're going. And then the next two people, the next person, they write down the address, they look on Google Maps, very methodically, they plan out how to get there. And then the third person, they just follow the second person because they're too lazy to even figure it out for themselves. So then those two people, they jump in a rickshaw and a taxi and they are going along the road. And then there's a roadblock. And so they're trying to figure out what to do. So then they get out of the auto rickshaw, and the second person, they're looking on Google Maps, they're trying to figure out how to get to this destination on time. And they jump in a bicycle rickshaw and they find their own way there. The first person who just jumped in without taking down the address, they're getting very angry now at their rickshaw driver and trying to figure out where to go. And then the third person, they just decide, what to do and have a sleep. So this is a little bit how the three energies work in our own mind. So the person who just has a sleep, this is tamagun, dull, lazy energy. And rajagun, mind so busy here and there, but doesn't think things through properly. So just all action with not so much deeper thought. And then the methodical person, this is sattvagun. So this is just to give some analogy of these three energies. So I want to give some little description of these three energies so you can become more acquainted with them. The sattvagun, it is known as the mode of goodness. And so when that is predominating our consciousness or our lifestyle, it is illuminating, it brings knowledge, it frees one from making stupid decisions which lead to bad reactions. And also in this mode of sattvagun, there's a feeling of happiness and contentment. Now the next energy, rajagun, the mode of passion, this is a very dynamic energy, like the quality of fire. And it brings about a lot of creativity, a lot of thought, and a lot of drive to fulfill so many desires. But it is somewhat like a comet flying through the sky, and eventually it burns out and descends into tamas. So when one is in the mode of rajagun, they have so many ideas, and they're always in a constant endeavor to try to fulfill these drives of rajagun. And then in the mode of tamagun, this is the mode of sleepiness, dullness, inertia, lazy, very low vibrational energy. So the mode of goodness, it conditions one with a feeling of happiness and contentment. The mode of passion, it impels one towards fruitative activity, which means it impels one to follow a path of reward-seeking activity. And the mode of ignorance completely covers people's knowledge, and it binds one to a lifestyle of madness and laziness. And so these are not just a subjective experience within the field of our own consciousness, but because these three energies pervade the entire material creation, you can even say that the entire material creation is a combination of these three energies only, then they also are manifesting in us in the outer world. So when there is a predominance of tamagun mixed with some rajas, then there's war, destruction, oppression, qualities like this in society. When there's predominance of rajagun, then there's very much materialism, chasing material objects and sense gratification, obsession with money, wealth, buying things, and this is the main mentality in society, is the propagation of acquiring things to bring happiness. And then in the mode of goodness, then people are more content, living a more peaceful life. So one day there was a merchant, a trader, walking through the forest, and he had to pass through this forest to get back to his city, to his village. And along the way he was robbed by three men, and they took away all of his possessions, and then the first man said, "Oh, now let's kill him." And then the other two said, the second man said, "Well, we've taken all of his possessions, why do we need to incur sin by killing him?" And then the third person said, "Let's just tie him up to a tree." So then they tied him up to a tree, and the merchant, he thanked the third robber for suggesting tying him up to a tree and not killing him. So then the robbers went their separate ways, and the merchant said to the robber, "Oh, can you please guide me back to the city? I don't really know the way." And that man said, "Oh, I cannot do that, because if I go back to the city, I'll be recognized by the police, and I'll be recognized as a robber, so that's not good for me." So this analogy conveys to us here another example of the three gunas. So the first man who just wanted to kill the person, this is tamagun. And the second man, he just wanted the possessions, so this is rajagun. And the third man, he also wanted the possessions, but he still had some morality, but he still robbed the person. So these three energies, they're like three shackles: iron shackles, silver shackles, and gold shackles. But shackles are shackles, so it doesn't matter whether you have iron, silver, or gold, you're still bound. So a prison is a prison. So one of the qualities of sattva gun is we feel very content, we feel very happy, we feel very peaceful in life, and there's no impetus to want to progress forward. So in this way, our development plateaus, and we just kind of sleep behind the wheel in a feeling of satisfaction. But because of these three gunas are always unstable and are always moving, then when your karma changes, then you'll lose that sattva gun, you'll lose that feeling of satisfaction, and you'll realize, oh, I haven't actually made any real progress. I was just kind of coasting for a while. So certain practices we do or lifestyles we follow, it brings us to the level of sattva gun, but we're still bound by this feeling of satisfaction and contentment, and there's no lasting result in that. So ultimately the result is nothing, because it's only a temporary result, and then after some time that is gone and you're back where you started from. So because these three energies are internal and external, a very strong way that we are taking in these energies is through foodstuffs. So you can have food in the tamagun, food in rajagun, and food in sattvagun. So any ideas what food in tamagun would be? What would that food be? Meat, okay. Why meat? What's wrong with a Big Mac?
It's very low vibration, and it's very hard to digest. Also, actually, the human body is not even made for digesting meat, and yeah, your vibration gets very low because you take all these emotions from the animals. When they get killed, they are very afraid at that moment, and these emotions you take in you. And I also heard that this is all karma you get, and as long as humans continue killing animals, they will also continue killing each other because this is energy needs to go somewhere else, you know.
Yes, so meat's very destructive, very low vibration. The human body is not designed to eat meat, so it stays in the system for a long time, becomes carcinogenic, poisons the body so much, and then not to mention the energetic quality that then goes in and affects your consciousness. Very bad karmic reactions, not just for ourselves, but the entire planet. Like it says in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, the more that we follow this societal mentality of killing and destruction, the more natural calamities there will be on earth, because this is a direct karmic result of being out of alignment with the natural order. Any other ideas for tamagun food? Sugar? Onion and garlic, yes. Alcohol, drugs, fatty foods.
Something rotten.
Rotten food, yeah, it sounds pretty Thomas. Fast foods, frozen foods, 'cause what do lazy people do? They get it out of the freezer and they microwave it, and they go back sitting on the couch watching Netflix. Canned food, yes, preservative food, plastic food. Go to an American shop and it's all pretty much just one molecule away from plastic. Right. So this lazy, pre-packaged, preservative, frozen food, this is all in the mode of tamas. And when we eat that, it goes into our mind and it increases the tamas in our consciousness. The next is rajagun. What could be some examples of rajasic food? Sugar? Chili? Chocolate? Pizza? Ice cream? Oh, they're all sounding so good. Fried food? Pakora if it's not prasadam. So the quality of rajas is very much passion. So that food that excites the senses, very salty, very sweet, very pungent, then that is in the mode of rajagun. So sugar, salt. Like you see so many cooking programs on TV, and it's just about what excites the senses the most, with no consideration whether those foods are compatible at all. So this is rajasic food, eating food out of season. This is also rajasic. So we take that kind of food stuff into our body, and this affects the same quality goes into our consciousness and propagates that rajasic mentality in the consciousness. And of course, the gunas are always mixed. So we're eating so much tamasic and rajasic food. Frozen food out of the freezer that's also very sweet and very salty. So it's a combination of rajasic tamas food.
Why food that's out of season? Why is that just?
Because nature, she naturally provides what is sattvic and beneficial for the human body at certain times of the year. So wherever you are on the earth, nature is providing for you all the minerals, all the vitamins, everything you need in that locality. And to be eating strawberries in the middle of winter on the other side of the world that have come so many food miles, this is very rajasic. And so that propagates more rajagun. And if you're eating locally sourced foodstuffs, then this is sattvagun. And also, but you crave these things out of season, that's a rajasic tendency. And when you are confined to just eating what's in season, you may not like it, but it promotes sattvagun.
One question, but in winter there grow almost no fruits. How can it be that the body doesn't need vitamins for such a long time?
There's vitamins in a lot of food, and also we have to look at where we live on earth, because that's also in the Gunnas. It's quite amazing how adaptable the human body is to certain conditions and where we live on earth, from extremely hot desert to frozen places so deep in snow. But is this really natural? Is this where we're actually meant to be living? In places that are minus 40 below, and we're burning so much fossil fuel while we import our strawberries from New Zealand to the other side of the world so we can have them. So we have to see, yes, some things won't grow in very cold conditions, but some of the things that will grow maybe can be giving us all the minerals that we need, like kale, for example, that grows in very cold climates. Kale.
Yes.
And so that's very full of vitamins and minerals. And then the more sattvic and subtle your consciousness becomes, the more you will be able to receive the food stuff, because everything is only a combination of earth, water, fire, air, and space. And so we've actually, because we're in such a reductionist society, we break everything down. What's the minerals? What's the vitamins? You know, like white bread, for example. It's quite funny if you think about white bread. You know, they made white bread because they didn't like the fiber of wholemeal bread and the taste and the look. So then they, you know, bleach the flour and basically remove all the goodness from it. And they make this nice white bread that's like a fluffy pillow. And then they realized after some time, oh, there's actually no vitamins in it. So then they synthetically reproduce the vitamins and they pump it back into this white bread. So this is really the human mentality at the moment. Let's break everything apart, remove it from context and the natural order, and really artificially try to recreate it and pump it back in. And we'll sell you all these other vitamins and everything to do that. So by eating very simple sattvic food and really with all consciousness receiving that, then you can get all your vitamins and minerals. Like for 6 months, I just ate khichdi. And my whole meditation, day, night, khichdi. And my meditation was, my body is made of Panch Mahabhuts, earth, water, fire, air, and space, the 5 elements. This khichdi is earth, water, fire, air, and space. And so these 5 elements are replenishing these 5 elements. So that's why, you know, bubbas can just live off milk, or they can just live off very simple things. This is not a prescription for everyone, but so much our consciousness, oh, I have to eat this mineral and this superfood and this and that. But if you actually have proper food combinations and you really receive the food properly, then the vitamins will be nourished. But if you're drinking your organic fair trade spirulina superfood smoothie with 20 different things mixed in with it. But it's all mixed together, and the tongue actually can't receive what is coming in. So smoothies aren't actually good from an Ayurvedic point of view, because you should take each food item, and then as soon as it hits the tongue, actually as soon as you touch it, then the digestive enzymes in the stomach, they get pre-released to receive that particular food stuff. So when you're drinking your superfood fair trade organic smoothie, and you've got 10 million things that each cost 150 euros each, but how much benefit are you getting from it? Because you can't even receive it properly, and half these things shouldn't even be mixed together, and they cancel each other out. So you can be eating all these things, but if you're not following what should mix together, the benefits are very less actually. So this is sattvically rajasic. So we're eating sattvic things, but in a very rajasic way. But we can be incredibly stubborn in our food choices because it's so intermixed with culture. If you come from certain places, then you eat so much bread. Germany, Europe, like we have some Europeans living in the ashram. So much bread I noticed they eat. But if you look at Western bread, not the white bread, but even wholemeal bread, it's this lump of wheat. And in the middle, it's not actually cooked properly, because if you look at traditional cultures, they make flat bread, and then they finish the flat bread over an open flame. And when they finish it over the open flame, it actually burns most of the gluten. So then you can actually receive that bread properly. But the Western style bread is this big lump of bread baked in an oven, and the outside is cooked okay to a certain degree, but inside there's no contact with the flame. And then so we're not really gluten intolerant, we're glyphosate intolerant, so that's one thing. And then the other thing is we're not cooking the bread properly. So many things we just don't cook, and we don't receive, and we mix out of order. So things aren't necessarily bad, it's just the way that we're approaching it. And so, we've all heard the saying, you are what you eat, but very much what food stuff is going in, it has a particular gunic quality to it, and then that goes into your consciousness. So, what could sattvic foods be? Fresh? Fresh? No. Wrong. Yeah. Fruit, veggies, yep. Whole grains, nuts. Milk. Right food combinations. Honey.
Properly cooked legumes.
All natural food actually, which is not fully, how to say, the human does not transform it too much.
Just naturally occurring foods from nature, not growing in a petri dish or printed from a 3D printer or something like that, and in season, because nature's very clever, and she's providing these foods at a certain time of the year for a reason. And we can take dried fruits and stuff like that, store them through the winter. And in former times, people actually had to take very, very little food because it was so high in prana that the very small quantity of food stuff could sustain their body. But in modern times, we have to take big pile of food on the plate because there's so little prana in it. Because it's genetically modified, it's sprayed with chemicals, it's picked 3 weeks before it's ready so it could be shipped on the other side of the world. And then when it arrives at the port, it gets fumigated. So not good. So in former times, the water was pure, the food was pure, and you just had to take a very small amount to sustain the body. But now there's such a minuscule amount of prana in it, you have to take this huge quantity to get the prana you need. And even then we're not getting the prana we need. More pakora. So,
And bitter also
bitter food, yes.
can be sattvic, right?
Yeah.
In a good amount, everything in a good amount also.
Yeah, because particularly bitter foods stimulate the digestive fire, so it's good to take some bitter at the start of your meal because that gets the Agni, the furnace going. And like in Ayurveda, they have 6 tastes, but we're very much just concentrated on a certain rajasic proportion of those tastes. And then so, because each taste is related to an element, so then we're not balancing the elements in the body because we're not eating all of the 6 tastes. That's a bit of another class, that one. So then let's look at some activities in the different modes. So austerity of speech consists in speaking of words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also reciting the wisdom from the scriptures. So this is a big one. Vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam. Controlling the tendency of the tongue, not just in terms of food that's coming in, but speaking. So many people don't think before they speak, or because they're in such a state of rajasic agitation, they can't just sit peacefully. They have to just talk nonsense when they're in the company of someone else, because they can't stand the agitation of their own mind. So they have to talking away. You know, there's a quote, all of humanity's problem stems from man's inability to sit alone with himself. And then the next one, Rajagun. Penance performed out of pride for the sake of gaining respect and honor and worship is said to be the mode of passion. It is neither stable nor permanent. So sometimes we'll actually go through so much discomfort just with the thought that at the end of this, everyone's going to respect me. I'm going to climb this huge mountain, or I'm going to break some Guinness World Record of a completely nonsense, useless thing. But then I'll get some respect, some pride from it. I'll learn this activity, or I'll undergo some hardship, sit in ice for, I don't know, 3 weeks or something. Yeah. Rajagun. So it's performing activities, but which can still have some difficulty performing those activities, but you're performing it with the consideration at the end, I'm going to, because you in the Rajagun, you're very much attached to the fruits of the activity, the results of the activity. So you can undergo some very difficult activity, but at the end, people are going to give me a lot of respect for doing that. I'm going to get a lot of honor. I'm going to get a lot of fame. So the whole thing is just an ego trip. And it looks like, oh, he's doing some sattvic tapasya. But actually, it's all just pride, really, just to get more pride. Oh, I'm chanting 64 rounds. How many are you chanting? So this is penance performed in the mode of passion. And then penance performed in the mode of tamagun. This can be self-torturous, also to with a mentality that I want to destroy or have control over other people. And so this is in the mode of ignorance. So you're going through some austerity, but it's to get some power, so then you can control others, or manipulate people in some way for your own ego agenda. So I'm going through various verses of the Bhagavad Gita here, because there's an entire chapter on the Gunnas in the Bhagavad Gita. So, taking refuge of insatiable desires and having been possessed by hypocrisy, pride, and arrogance, such people of impure vows engage in action having adopted false doctrines out of delusion, So we get all these ideas in the mind, all these all these rajasic and tamasic ideas, and then we try to follow them, but it's all just basically an ego trip. And while contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and then from this attachment, lust develops, and if that object, mental, physical, emotional, that you're meditating upon in your mind, if that doesn't come to fruition and tamas or rajas there, then you get very angry when that, because all anger is essentially coming from unfulfilled desires. You have some desire or some attachment to some preference, and because that preference has not been fulfilled, then you get very angry. So this is a tamasic response. So from anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool, into the pool of Maya. So falling prey to immeasurable worries that persist until death, they are convinced of an idea that enjoyment of sense pleasure is the ultimate aim of life. So this Rajagun, it's like an insatiable fire, and no matter how many desires you fulfill, it will never be enough, and a new desire will come. And even if you get what you want, it can just feed the desires more and more and more, and this fire just completely takes over our consciousness in our life. And so, nice verse from the Gita: as the fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, and as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of lust. So these different degrees of lust, because the gunas are always mixed. You might have a very sattvic mentality that I want to live out in the country, nice peaceful life, have my own garden, but still this is a self-centered desire, which is okay, nothing wrong with that per se, but there's still some rajagun in there. So this is a certain covering of lust, but it's not as strong as, let's say, the next one down in the mode of rajagun. I want to have a big business, I want to have so many houses, I want to have so many cars, a private plane, a private boat. And then tamagun again, so many desires we have, and depending upon the strength of the rajagun, then these desires will manifest in a certain way, because when these impressions are in the consciousness, it's only when there's a prominence of rajagun that causes a conjunction of our awareness with these impressions. So the living entity, his consciousness becomes covered in different degrees of lust to enjoy the various objects of the material world. So if you just reflect back on your life for a moment, and you can see at different times when these different gunas were prominent, and your behavior, your activities, how it affected your relations with other people. You just take a moment to think about that. And hopefully we're a little bit more sattvic now, or we've had times where we've been more sattvic, and you can reflect back on things that you have done, maybe in a state of tamas or in a state of rajas, and because your consciousness was contracted at that time, it's a reaction state, and there's no awareness of the consequences of what you're doing. You're just reacting like an animal in a cage. So then moving on, because these gunas are just everywhere in our life and in our mentality. So let's look at faith through the lens of the gunas. So one's faith can be either sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. So men in the mode of, or women in the mode of goodness, they worship the demigods. So the demigods means like higher celestial beings, and you have some conception, if I worship them, I will go to some kind of heavenly planet at the end of my life and have very heavenly enjoyments. And people in the mode of passion, they worship demons, because if they worship these kind of demonic spirits, they will get some power. And then those in the mode of ignorance, they worship ghosts and spirits. And so even in the mode of sattva guna, it's not stating here that sattvic people worship God, because God's not in the gunas. So those who are worshipping ancestors, or those who have some kind of conception of heaven, this is more of a rajasic mentality, because it's more about you're attached to the fruit at the end of it. You're going to go to heaven and enjoy some celestial fruit forever. So this gives a lot of context actually about different people's spiritual mentalities. That there's so many different traditions and paths on the earth, and I'm not saying they're all wrong, but it just gives a context about how someone's faith is being filtered through the gunas, and depending on upon which guna is prominent, there's a particular theology, a particular cosmology, and a particular conception of spirituality in relation to the proportion of the guna that's it's being filtered through. And then, so also in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is giving descriptions of when you're practicing these different faiths through the modality of the gunas, what is your destination? So if one's dies in the mode of ignorance, then he loses the opportunity for a human birth, and he goes down into an animal species. If one's in the mode of Rajagun, then again you'll take birth where you can further be attached to more and more material things. And if one's in the mode of goodness, gradually they'll go up to higher planets. But because all of these things are karmic, when the karma runs out, whether you've gone up, down, then you come back to earth, and the result is nothing that's lasting. Because the higher planets, they are good karma, the lower planets, they are bad karma. But either way, when their karma runs out, then you return back to earth. So it does not lead to any kind of liberation from samsara, the cycle of birth and death. But what we are offering here is Bhakti Yoga, which is on the transcendental platform. Because Krishna, he's saying people are looking for God within the gunas, within the material nature, but God doesn't exist there. He's on the transcendental plane. So in Bhakti Yoga, it's about following a lifestyle and mentality that is actually transcendental to these three gunas. And so it doesn't bind us in the mode of tamas and rajas, or even with a feeling of contentment in sattva gun, a contentment in the sense that there's no need to progress further. So Bhakti Yoga is very wonderful in this way, because it frees you from the bondage of these gunas. So also people's happiness is coming through the filters of these gunas also. So that happiness, which in the beginning seems like poison, just like if you take some very bitter Ayurvedic medicine like neem. It doesn't taste very nice, but in the end, it will lead to very good health for the body. But if you take something that's very sweet in the beginning, and you keep taking that, and it's maybe not good for your health, in the end, the result will be very poor. So, in modern times, because we live in such a rajasic society, then it's all about the propagation of immediate sense gratification with no thought of the long-term results. So then we want immediate happiness, but in the end it only leads to suffering. Because people don't even know how to enjoy, actually, in modern times. They go to the pub, they go take drugs, they take so many things, and they maybe get some injection of so-called happiness for some time, but then the result will come a more contracted state of consciousness and then bad health. So even their enjoying is not really enjoying. So there's 3 states we can observe: waking, sleeping, and dreaming. So waking is like sattva, sleeping is tamas, and dreaming is rajasic. So you might think, oh, I only dream when I'm sleeping. But most of us, our whole life is just living in a dream. It's just a rajasic dream of chasing so many ideas. And even when we're trying to aspire to practice bhakti, because our consciousness is so much still in the gunas, then our bhakti is still, our movement towards bhakti is filtered through the gunas. But we are actually in the 4th state of consciousness, turiya. So we are the witness to these states of waking, sleeping, and dreaming. And this state of turiya is beyond the gunas, because these 3 states, waking, sleeping, and dreaming, these are the gunas. But turiya, consciousness, which is coming from your soul, an eternal property of your soul, this is on the spiritual platform. So it's transcendental to the gunas. That's why you can observe the movements of the gunas, because it's actually the soul that's doing the observing, because you are actually the soul. But due to ignorance, we are identifying with the movements of the gunas, and we think ourselves to be the movements of the gunas, but really our awareness is aware of the movements of the gunas. So everything you observe externally and internally, this is the field, Ketra. But we are Ketrigya, we are the knower of the field. And in the moment, our life is very much conditioned to identifying with the field, that which is known. But we are the knower of the field. We are the witness to the changing states of the mind and the changing states of the body. So we want to be situated beyond the gunas. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, having transcended these 3 gunas of nature, which are the source of the production of the body, the embodied being is freed from birth, death, disease, and old age, and all types of miseries, and attains liberation. So know that all mental states, be they the nature of illumination, sattva-gun, dynamism, rajagun, or inertia, tamagun, originate exclusively from me. This is Krishna speaking, and I am not under the gunas, yet the gunas are under me. So Krishna is pointing out here, he is the supreme controller. And really we are only under the influence of this material energy because of our aversion to Krishna, because of our obsession with self-centered consciousness, which is coming from Rajagun. But in this mentality, it's always unstable, and you'll never find any lasting happiness in that level of consciousness, because and that level of consciousness predominated by the gunas, it's always in a flux, always in a flow. It can never be stable, never for any permanent amount of time. So when there's an excessive amount of tamas in the consciousness, then we have the experience of depression, or suffering, a very contracted internal space. And if you're in that energetic space, you actually need some rajas to bring you out of that. You need some fire. And all these gunas, we need them in balance. So I'm not saying that I'll just try and be free from all the gunas. I guess I am saying that in one sense, but still we have to work with them in a sattvic way. So if one is feeling very down, very depressed, in a very suffering state, then some rajas will be very good for them, because that will motivate them with some sense of fire or activity to get them off the couch and up and outside. So for those people, more rajas is a good thing. It's because sometimes when we hear about, these three gunas, okay, I've got some description, and then I'll categorize that. I'll put it in a little box in my head, and then now I think that I've understood that. But so this is real black and white thinking, and we have to have the awareness of when is the appropriate time to work with these different gunas. Because rajas is very much needed to function in the world, and if you didn't have any rajagun, then you wouldn't get out of bed. There wouldn't be any momentum to even get out of bed. But the excessive amount of rajas, this is like a pandemic of anxiety in the modern society. Just constant thoughts going around all the time. If only I had this, if only I had that, if only I had this. And it's like a hamster wheel that we're constantly mentally engaged with. So it's always nice to try to increase the sattva gun, because it brings harmony, balance, and equilibrium. So any time that you're feeling happy, you're feeling light, you can know for sure that sattva gun is prominent in your consciousness at that time. And actually, all desires, they are a desire for sattva gun. Because even if you want really nice pizza with pineapple and chocolate and extra chili on it, and it's so incompatible, but still you think, oh, if I just get this, I'll feel content, I'll feel satisfied. So it's actually that feeling of contentment, which is sattva gun, that you're actually craving for, but you're doing it in a very tamasically rajasic way. So we can have no end of ideas of how we're going to fulfill that craving for sattva, but try to see it's the sattva that we're actually striving for. If I just get my 5th house in the Bahamas and just one more private jet, then I'll be content. So again, striving for sattva gun. So that's what we're always striving for, but in a very indirect way. And because we're doing it in a very indirect way, we're doing it through the modalities of tamas or sattva gun, which then feeds those tamas and rajas more in the consciousness, and so we never can actually attain that level of sattva gun. And so our experience is very much shaped by what we do. So the places that we live, the social activities that we engage in, all these things, they all have their prominence of particular gunas. Like the country is the place of sattva gun. The cities is the place of rajagun, because a city is basically a gathering where you can satisfy your senses most easily 24/7. You can go to the shop 24 hours a day to get your strawberries out of season. That's the whole essential reason for a city, is the convenience of serving the senses, which is okay, it's got its place, but that's the prominent energy. So, and there's also so much distraction there, so many things that you can be engaged in. I can go to the museum, I can go to this art show, I can go to this music show, this new thing, this and that, all rajasic, because the mind's in such a state of disturbance that it has to be constantly reaching from one thing to the other. And we think, oh, I'm very educated and this and that because I've went to the latest music show or whatever. But it's just a state of agitation of the mind. I used to live in a very remote place, and sometimes I would organize little retreats, and people from the biggest city in New Zealand, they would come. And it was so peaceful and quiet there. People's mind would get so agitated. Actually, their mind is already agitated, but because in the city, there's so much noise and distraction, they don't notice it. But when in a very peaceful place, they can't handle the agitation of their own mind. So that's why a lot of people don't like the country, because there's nothing to distract them from their rajasic mind. And then the pubs, the gambling houses, the prostitutes' den, this is the place of tamas. So we can see, where do we like to hang out? Oh, let's go to the pub. And then also different kinds of work, that's also in the Gunnas. Of course, everyone has to make a living, but it's good to be mindful, what work am I engaged with, because that's also feeding the Gunnas into my consciousness. Leisure time, what we like to do to relax, television, sports, all these things have a ratio of the Gunnas. Like, for a very long time, I lived in New Zealand's most famous surfing spot. So people from all over the world, they would come. But then if there's like 2 weeks of no waves, like people think, oh, surf is very chill, nice and relaxed. But 2 weeks, flat conditions, no waves, whoa, just see how agitated they get. Or even if there is waves in the surf, they're punching one another. This is my wave. This is my temporary wave in the ocean that stays for a moment. And some people try, they have this identity, I'm a local, so I own this wave. It's the madness of Rajagun. So even if you have some leisure time activity, but if it's prominated by a lower guna, then that feeds your consciousness, and the momentary feeling of sattva guna you get, it doesn't lead to the continued expansion of consciousness. So, just staying with the surfing topic, a lot of people used to say to me, oh, surfing's my meditation. And if we look at it from a point of meditative absorption, yes, there is a similarity there of being completely absorbed in the moment, a moment of ekagrata, and that leads to an expansion of consciousness. But because the modality that they're getting into that ekagrata state is through a very rajasic modality, then it also injects Rajagun into the consciousness. So then as soon as they're not on that wave, then they're not left with a more expanded state of sattva consciousness, they're left with a lot of Rajagun in their consciousness. So if your only way you can get to a meditative state is through running or through some very dynamic activity, that's okay, and you can evolve from there, but that's not going to lead to a continued increased level of sattva-guna and expanded consciousness. Whereas sitting peacefully in meditation, then there's nothing rajasic about that. I mean, you can do it in a rajasic way, but the external environment around you is not increasing the rajas like a very dynamic activity. So then when we're sitting down in meditation, even when you finish the meditation, if you keep meditating over a prolonged time, that increases the natural level of sattva-guna, because your one-pointed absorption is a more organic and holistic way of approaching it. So then your base level of sattva guna will increase. But if the only way you know how to get into an absorbed state is through a very tamasic or a jasic modality, then yes, you feel good while you're in that momentary state of absorption, but it doesn't lead to the continued expansion of consciousness. So, Krishna says in the Gita, no one can remain acting even for a moment, because even inaction is a form of action, and there'll be a result for that inaction. So, did you catch that? So, you might be in confusion about what to do. So then I'm just going to do nothing. And no result will come from that, because I'm not doing this thing about, I'm not sure if that's a good idea or this is not a good idea. But even refraining from action is a form of action, and there will be a reaction for not engaging in action. Very tricky. So Maya, illusion, has a way of pulling you in. So in Bhakti Yoga, when you come under the guidance of Guru teaches you and displays to you by his own behavior and his own mentality of how to act, but not act in such a way, or not act in such a way that causes further bondage and karma. Because Bhakti Yoga is on the transcendental, it's nirguna. So Bhakti Yoga is a whole lifestyle of acting, but not acting from the platform of the gunas. So like for food, for example, we try to prepare and gather food that is sattvic as possible. But we've just heard that the sattva guna still, that will descend into rajas at some point, because everything is unstable in the material world. So sattva guna is not enough. So it's nice to prepare sattvic food as possible, but then we offer that food to Krishna, we offer that food to God, and then it becomes transubstantiated into prasadam, into spiritual food, because just by like pouring water on the root of a tree or on a plant, then the entire plant, the stem, the trunk, the leaves, the branches, the flowers, the fruit, it all becomes nourished, the entirety of the tree. But if you pour water just on one leaf, then that may nourish that one leaf, but what about the rest of the plant? So by having a life of devotion and offering to God, it's like pouring water on the root of creation, and then all of creation and much beyond creation, actually, it all becomes nourished. But when we have this reductionist mentality and just try to do it part by part by part, because it's so disconnected, then we can never find any stability in that, because it's not a really valid methodology, because it's still within the gunas. So this bhakti yoga is it's very simple, but it's also very deep. And in this way, there's so many small lifestyle adjustments you can make that look like you're doing the same thing as the ordinary person, but actually you're freeing yourself from the bondage of the gunas, and you're working and engaging from the transcendental platform. And so for the very root cause of being bound in the gunas is ahamameti, I and mine, I, me, my self-centered consciousness. And in Bhakti Yoga, we put Krishna in the center. So as soon as Krishna, God, who is the source of all existence, is in the center of our life, then this immediately gets you out of the egoic state of consciousness, because it is the egoic state of consciousness which causes bondage. So even in terms of spiritual practice, your spiritual practice can still be totally predominated by me, I, and mine. So when it's predominated by me, I, and mine, that's still in the Gunnas. Anyway, enough about me. What do you think about me? So, because we're always just enamored with ourselves, and it's like, oh, I had some nice experience back in 1973. How do I get back there? And it's me, 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 me. And so there's nothing wrong with having nice experiences, but still, the false sense of self, the ahankara, the ego, is it is coming from the gunas of material nature. So you can never actually be situated in any abiding spiritual reality when you're trying to bring your egoic self along for the ride, because the material ego can't abide in transcendental consciousness. So this is a subtle but very profound point. That the you who's trying to get enlightened will never be enlightened, because the you that's trying to get enlightened is a product of material energy, and the material energy can't get enlightened. Did people catch that? Or confusing?
Any idea, kind of the way I interpret it, is any idea that you currently have of what enlightenment might be, or spiritual progress, you can't actually know what that is, because it's all just coming from the mind and the goodness. So you've got to trust in the path that you choose.
Yeah, because all of our ideas are coming through the filter of the gunas. And it's not, so I'm also, just to be clear, I'm not saying that there is no you, because eternally there is a you. But the you that you think you are is not you. And the you that you are already, that is not striving for a self-centered enlightenment, because what we're promoting here is this I. It's already the actual you, the Atma, is already beyond the gunas. It's always transcendental to the gunas, and it can never be restricted by the gunas. But our awareness is latched onto a false sense of self. And that false sense of self is comprised of the gunas, grossly and subtly. And then we try to enlighten this false sense of self. But the process of bhakti yoga is to realize who you actually are. That is Atma. And from that level of soul, Atma, which is transcendental to the gunas, Krishna is also there, just waiting for you beyond the gunas, just sitting there playing his flute, chilling out in Vrindavan, having a good time, just waiting for you to engage in his service. Because the Bhakti Yoga is about following a lifestyle that is enacted from the platform of the soul, of Atma, and engaging in loving reciprocation with the Supreme Soul. So all of this is transcendental to the gunas, but from an outer perspective, it looks like we're doing the same things, eating the food, walking here and there, but all this is completely nirgun, it's beyond the gunas, and it is not about me, I, and mine, the material me, I, and mine. And sometimes people think, oh, there is no me. But if there wasn't an eternal sense of I-ness, which is an eternal quality of the Atma, of the self, there would be no sense of I-ness to superimpose on material reality. This is a subtle point. But if there was no I-ness in the Atma, there'd be no I-ness to identify with anything. So because we have individuality eternally, that is our soul, then due to illusion, we can mix that sense of I-ness with the gross or subtle material coverings. So by following the practice of bhakti yoga, by chanting the names of God, by eating prasadam, by trying to increase the sattva guna in our life, then we can start to be situated in our true nature and act from that platform. And from that platform, we'll no longer be engaging with life, trying to chase some dream conception of self and all the illusory ideas that it's always trying to chase that never bring any kind of lasting satisfaction, because you'll actually be situated in the platform of your true self and be relishing from the spiritual platform. And that is the Vishuddha Sattva, the completely pure level of Sattva Gun that we're actually striving for, because we're all striving for a lasting feeling of satisfaction and contentment. But because we're doing it in the gunas, which are always in flux, always in motion, it can never be found there, because it's the very nature of this material world to always be in movement. But this drive for lasting contentment and satisfaction, this is completely natural because it's coming from the soul. But when the soul's identified with this mind-body complex, then we're just trying to find that contentment and satisfaction in relation to the mind-body complex, which is not our actual identity. So the lasting satisfaction and contentment that we're looking for, that can only be found on a transcendental source, because everything in the transcendental world is eternal. And I think it was T.S. Eliot who said, a sign that I have eternal desires and they can't be fulfilled within this material plane is a sign of my eternality. Because if you're a temporary being, but you've got these eternal desires, from where are they coming? Because we have no experience of eternality, and everything around us is temporary. So how can the idea of even having lasting peace and satisfaction arise? It's not possible. That's coming from the soul, the eternal soul, because in this material consciousness, we're like a fish out of water, and we're gasping for breath to return back home to spiritual consciousness. So one very beautiful verse from Bhagavad Gita: one must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself, for the mind is the friend of the conditioned soul as well as his enemy. So we all have a mind, but we want to learn how to befriend the mind and work with the mind and work with it in such a way that it will be a very good companion to help expand our consciousness. But it can be a very dangerous tool, because if the mind becomes in charge of the reins, and then we're just following all the different desires in the mind. But the bhakti yoga, it very nicely teaches you how you can befriend your mind, because in one sense our whole life, but particularly spirituality, is about relationship. It's about relationship to our mind, relationship to the outer world, relationship to God, relationship to everything. But at the moment, our relationality is very much in a distorted perception. So how to correctly adjust our relationality, this is the process of bhakti yoga. And everything really to come to a level of peace is to have the relational concept of seeing everything in relation to God. Because soon as we see things separate from God, then we're just lost in a never-ending stream of illusion. So that includes seeing your own mind, your own thoughts, your own desires, all in relation to God. So I'm not saying coming from God, but how can we work with these things in such a way that they don't become like a fire and consume us, but acknowledge them so we can move closer and closer towards God, rather than being in denial or thinking that they are the ultimate goal of life. And the most wonderful thing about Bhakti Yoga is how to be in relation to God, not just as the creator of this universe, or as the karmic controller, or as some king-like conception, but how to be in relation to God in the most loving way. And that is Radha and Krishna, the most loving relationship that we can have with God. So from the correct relationality to our own sense of identity, that is Atma, to the ultimate relation, Atma's relationship with God, and the most loving manifestation, that is Radha and Krishna. There's actually so much more I could say on the Gunnas, because they're everything in the material creation, but I'll kind of wind it up now. So our goal in Bhakti Yoga, our goal is love. So that's far beyond me, I, and mine. Because in our understanding of love, the object of love is at the centerpiece of our existence. So that totally gets you out of me, I, and mine consciousness. And that is so foreign to our worldly experience, because our worldly experience is all about me, I, and mine. So that kind of love, we don't actually really have an experience of it. So we actually have to follow a process to enter into that love, because our existence for eternity has been in a conditioned state, all about myself. Just another point to note on Bhakti Yoga. Your whole mind, intelligence, ego, that's all comprised of the Gunnas. So when you're relying upon yourself to figure it all out and try and come to some level of transcendental consciousness, because you're doing that through instruments which themselves are the Gunnas and have a propensity to keep you within the Gunnas, they don't really have any power to get you out of the Gunnas. It's just like if you're drowning in the ocean and there's no one in sight and you put your hand up. How are you going to get out of the ocean? It's not possible. Right? Someone has to come along on a boat, on a transcendental boat beyond the Gunnas of the ocean, and pull you out of the ocean. So that is Guru. God sends Guru to pull you out of the ocean of the Gunnas. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Daiva Isha Gunamayi Mama Maya Drutaya Mama Eviye Praklante Taramitam Tarantite. This ocean of material illusion is very, very difficult to cross. But just by surrendering to Him, and very easily you can be delivered. And so Krishna's very generous personality. If you just take one step to Krishna, He will take 10 steps towards you. If you just offer Him a fruit, a flower, just a leaf, He will accept that. So, under guidance of Guru, we learn how to always think of Krishna, be devoted in all of our life and our activities to Krishna, and worship Him. And then Krishna is saying, by following this, you'll come to me without fail. And He gives His promise that you are very dear to Him and you'll be delivered. So just by following this path of Bhakti Yoga, then you can relieve yourself of the burden of thinking it's all upon me, it's all about my own effort. Of course, your own sincerity and effort is required to some degree, but just relying on that alone, self-elevationism, will not get you out of the ocean of material nature, because it has no power to. You have to be connected to a transcendental source to move beyond this ocean of material illusion. And when you have a path or a technique that's still predominated by material sense of I, me, and mine, it simply doesn't have the power to do it. So we need to take shelter of bhakti for that. Any questions, thoughts, complaints?
I was kind of thinking about the last shloka you shared over here, how we have to befriend the mind. And it seems like a bit of an oxymoron contradiction, because why befriend the mind when it's under the influence of the Gunnas, and therefore the mind, because the mind doesn't want you to connect with God, it wants you to stay in illusion under the material energy. But you kind of answered that. I guess the answer is then, like you said, through Guru. So we train our minds to follow the instructions from Guru, and that way it can lead us to beyond the Guru. Is that right?
It's useful to befriend the mind in the sense when the mind's very out of control, your life is not so enjoyable. And, the basic dharma of mind is raga dvesha, accepting and rejecting. And when tamagun or rajagun is there, is trying to accept and reject things in relation to those gunas, like sugar, chocolate, that kind of thing. With rajagun is there. If sattva gun is there, then what it's accepting and rejecting is a different quality. But the commonality is there, that it is trying to accept and reject to move you closer to that lasting state of contentment and happiness. And that desire in itself, that's nothing wrong with that, because the desire is actually coming from the soul, trying to connect to God, but it doesn't have awareness of that, so it's trying to do it in the material aggregate. And so by regulating the senses, eating nice vegetarian food, regulating your sleep, all these kinds of things, then the sattvic energy in the mind begins to increase, and the mind becomes more friendly instead of being like a master just telling you to go here and there. So then by following the sattvic lifestyle, the mind becomes more of a friend to help you on your spiritual soul journey to actually come to that transcendental platform of lasting peace and happiness, which is your relationship with God and being established in that. Does that answer your question?
What is different between ahankara and soul?
Oh, very good question. What's the difference between ahankara and soul? Or what's the difference between material ego and soul? So in Padma Purana, Uttrakanda, chapter 226, verses 34 to 37, there's a very nice description of the soul. And 3 attributes have been described. Ganhitra, Kartritra, and Bhogitra, which means the soul has 3 eternal qualities that can never be separated from your soul. So the first one is Gyan. It has the ability to know, which means consciousness. It has awareness. The second quality is Karta. It has agency, the ability to instigate activity. And the third, Bhog, it has the ability to experience. So it can know, it can instigate, and it can experience. So these qualities are in the soul itself, like in Nyaya Darshan, one of the 6 classical schools of Indian philosophy, their perspective is that the soul has no ability to know, it's only when it's in contact with the material mind. But actually this is an incorrect Siddhanta. The correct Siddhanta, as described in Padma Purana, is that the soul has these 3 eternal qualities. So, because it's got the ability to know and is eternally individual, like a photon of light emanating from the sun is an eternal individual photon of light. So this eternal individual photon of spiritual consciousness, which is your soul, and has these 3 eternal qualities to know, to experience, and to instigate activity, it has its, you can say, true sense of ego, true sense of I-ness. Now, because we are in a conditioned state, that eternal spiritual sense of I-ness has is now related to the material ego, and the material ego is simply a collection of the impressions stored in your subconscious mind, which collate together like a cloud, and all your past experiences, they give rise to a particular personality or persona based upon the experiences that you've had. So this eternal sense of I of the soul then gets superimposed upon the collection of experiences, and then you think, I am my experiences. So we have I eternally, but that sense of I-ness at the moment is based upon our material experiences. So, and that is ahankar, I am the doer. So the material ego is the sense of I-ness in relation to the impressions in the subconscious mind. And the soul has these 3 eternal qualities, and it does have a sense of I-ness, but that I-ness is not referent to anything material whatsoever, because it's spiritual.
So the 3rd quality of the soul, to instigate activity.
Mm-hmm.
What is that activity? Because the activity is the only activity that we kind of, activity as we know it is all on a material plane. So what activity is it referring to in the Padma Purana?
So just like there's a river, and that river has 2 banks, and there's a fish swimming in the middle of the river. That fish can swim to the left bank, or it can swim to the right bank. Now, the right bank here represents the God, the spiritual world, and spiritual consciousness. And the left bank represents ahammamayati, material consciousness, me, I, and mine, and the material world. So that instigation of activity, that is free will, and you have the free will to move to spiritual consciousness, or you have the free will to move to material consciousness. And when you swim into the ocean of material consciousness, now, not that this ever had a beginning point, because we've been conditioned eternally, but this is just an analogy. When you enter into that material consciousness, then your soul becomes covered with the subtle body, manas, buddhi, ahankar. And then over that subtle body, then the gross physical body. So depending on which atmosphere that you swim into with your free will, you'll get a particular body in accordance to that.
Its activity is, sort of the choice, whether it chooses to engage with the other subtle material qualities and moving towards identifying more with material or that spiritual nature, moving towards Krishna, God, or towards the Gunnas.
And also, if the soul had no karta, no agency, all the scriptures, all the teachings would be useless. Why waste our time running around chanting Hare Krishna, go classes and everything? Because if you had no agency, for whom are the scriptures talking to? You should do this, you should not do that. If you do this, the results will be this. If you do that, the results will be that. But if you've got no agency, no ability to choose in which direction you go, why the need for any teachings? it'd all be predestined or by chance or some other not well thought through philosophy.
Oh, I never occurred to me that you don't have choice, but it's from where does it come? Does the choice, is it being instigated by the mind? You know, because we have to make the mind a tool, or is it the soul, you know? Because the soul has this ability, the quality of activity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering kind of from where that comes, the drive. You know, when I choose to you know, observe myself, say I want to sit here and listen to you rather than run to the toilet even though I feel an urge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is that my understanding that comes from the mind, it's not the soul, but it's still moving me towards transcendence,
Mm-hmm.
and hearing transcendental knowledge. So going to that one side of the path rather than just giving into the urges of my body.
Mm.
And so that's coming from the mind, but you're kind of saying that's from the soul. So.
I'm saying that the soul has this capacity for agency. Maybe you can correct me here, Madhava, but we can maybe say that the manas and the ahankar, they have no power unless the soul is animating them. So you've got this mind and you've got this intelligence, but if there's no soul to empower them, then they have no inherent power within themselves, because it's insentient matter. So because the soul is there, but it's empowering and filtering through the mind and intelligence, then that mind and intelligence is only empowered from the soul. But depending upon how strong the impressions are in the mind and the consciousness, and what guna is intelligent, what guna is prominent at that time, then that propensity of agency, depending upon the guna, will guide you in one direction or another direction. And the soul is longing for this state of lasting contentment and happy, loving relationship with God, but because we've had maybe no awareness of this for so many lifetimes, we're so used to working through the mind and the body and just following the impressions in the mind. So when we hear about the spiritual teachings and we're then striving to move more towards that, it's still a mixture of material ego, because if our goal is actually praying, then it's the natural propensity of the soul, such ananda, bliss, knowledge, eternity. And in praying, the object of love is at the center. So, yeah, I don't know. Madhava, you want to speak to this? Yeah.
The soul.
So my thoughts are coming from the soul or from the mind, if you will, or my thought and feelings.
Agency.
Yeah, like you have the soul has this quality to. The soul has the quality to instigate activity, and
Which
you know,
activity is she doing?
I guess the mind, you know, is telling me. My understanding is the mind will tell me to do this or do that, or I use the mind as a tool. Trying to formulate the question.
So it's this thought and feeling and idea coming from the mind or from the soul?
Yeah, and what's the relationship between, like, when is it my mind speaking or the soul? Can't formulate it better right now.
The soul, as you told, Karkrita, means, for example, Mamai Vanso Jivaluke Jivabuta Sanatana. In this verse, then it says that it does a karshati, that the soul is attracting to herself the mind and all the elements, subtle elements, because the soul is in the level of the chakra. We are in the level of the chakra, and all around us when we decide not to serve God, when we decide to give our back to God, no, we decide to enjoy separately from Him, then automatically we attract to ourselves all the material element with all the power they have, like intelligence, power to grasp, and everything. So now we think that this power of grasping and so on, and smelling and thinking and the material ego and intelligence is something like an organ, material organ, but actually they are atomic. And all these atoms are floating around. So the soul is doing this, only is deciding, I don't want to serve God, for example. Now you attract all these elements around you, and now you are into this body. And automatically now you get all the packet of all the samskara with you. So you decide, your will is, I want to serve God or not. And this is going on when? Millions of years ago? No, every single moment. Every single moment you decide, I want to serve God or not. This free will is there. So if you decide not, then you get the full packet for you, which means now I'm identified with the body and all the mind and all these millions of samskara, millions of how to say desire, which will come to your mind endlessly, endlessly. So from where are coming all this idea, desire, and feeling I have? From this packet of samskara, which is endless. Like you get the body of a crow, automatically the crow doesn't go to school how to speak like this, how to move. A cow doesn't go to school to teach to her calf to bring it inside and give milk. Automatically from where? From all this samskara. So all this is the packet we come to you moment by moment. This is material, not you the self. But the point is that if you are more in sattva guna, in goodness, then you can understand actually I am not this feeling and thought. I can decide which one to choose. And the next point important is that if you are under the guidance of Guru, if you are under the guidance of Guru, then he will give you spiritual samskara. Understand? So then now these samskara material are going down, and now you get spiritual samskara, and they will come to the mind. Then the free will be more positive, because then slowly, slowly you don't have to choose between only I follow this thought or the other, which are all material actually. But now I can choose I follow this material thought or I follow this spiritual thought. So then it is increasing the opportunity. And then all this material thought will go and disappear completely, only you will have spiritual. So mainly our position is to slowly, slowly we got into the position of witness, that I am the one who is experiencing and I can see each thought are coming to me. Each one, I am not this thought, but I can also have the power to choose if following it or not, no? According to what? If you are lucky, you will follow it according to the teaching of your guru, the teaching of the Shastra, the Holy Scripture, Bhagavad Gita and other, and the teaching of other saints, like this. Otherwise, we will just like this, going deeply into this material energy. Even you are in goodness, you will just choose samskara which are into goodness, no? Like I want to stay in a natural place, near the sea, and do yoga, eat vegetarian food. But this is all material. Only you are choosing this instead of going to eat meat and drugs and prostitute and gambling, no? But both are material, you know. So this does not bring you, not because you choose to stay in the nature and eating clean food and be peaceful with other, that you realize already the self, no? So because all these thought will not be of of the soul, it is still a packet of material experience, just more in goodness. So this take time, you know. It's not that because you do one year even or few years of yoga, you go behind it. Even just not by listening this class we are speaking is not enough to go behind it and realize it. You need to really sacrifice, live the life of sacrifice, self-surrender to the spiritual master with sincerity, and give everything every day, every day, every day. Slowly, slowly you go beyond by the mercy of God. This is important. What he was saying before. It is said that we are not by our own ego. I am the one who can go beyond it. You cannot. Only by the mercies coming down. Mercy of God and mercy of Guru. And your own effort. Otherwise not possible. But other place they will tell you, no, don't worry, you are already beyond it, you are already the God. Everything is one. Then you think, I already attained it, there is nothing to do. But not. Srimad Bhagavatam explained, and it is part of your Maya idea, that illusion that you think I've already crossed it, I'm already beyond just because I heard it once, no? That you are not this body, you are not the mind, and all the I'm free already, but this is all part of Maya. No? It takes time and surrender, endeavors, sincerity, and slowly, slowly we receive this mercy, and slowly, slowly we can really see all this theory, you can really see it inside, how it works, no? And you can really understand, oh, this fault is external, and everything, also all my activities are external. What I am doing, taking this one, speaking now, chanting kirtan, cooking food, distributing prasada. This is also external. I'm not doing it. Who is doing it? Or is done by the tribuna, or is done by the internal potency, Bhakti Shakti. So in any case, you are not the doer. The only doer is you choose which side to surrender. I surrender to God, then internal potency is taking over everything and she's doing everything. I surrender to Maya, then all external energy is doing everything.
Time for kirtan.